In this video I wanted to point out something that is called relative volume. Now you're going to see that many people today, or some people today, they think they've discovered something like, or a better way of identifying volume, and based on the concept of what's called relative volume or seasonality. So what they'll do is they'll take volume, let's say at 1 o'clock, and instead of comparing it to 12 and 11 and 10 and 9 on the same day, they'll compare it to 1 o'clock yesterday, 1 o'clock the day before, and 1 o'clock 3 days ago. So they're going to be comparing the volume at that particular time in that session to the volume at the same time in different sessions to determine whether it is high or low. So that means what they'll do is, they'll compare Friday's volume to last Friday's volume, and the week before that, and the week before that. Or they'll take the first half hour volume and compare it to the first half hour volume yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. So they will do this relative comparison of volume based on the time of day, for example, or whatever period. So this is called relative volume or seasonality volume or whatever. But the crazy thing is that Wyckoff had already identified this. He had identified relative volume a long time ago. And here's an example. There were certain days that the market was open back in Wyckoff's day where obviously the volume would be less. Alright? The actual volume of February 21st was 2.4 mil. But in comparison with the volume of the recent 5-hour and recent previous Saturday sessions, you see, he's comparing volume on Saturday, and I guess the market was open on Saturday, with prior sessions. So this is like comparing Friday's volume to last Friday's volume. Here he's comparing Saturday's volume to last Saturday's volume. So he compares it to last Saturday's volume, and he says it is clearly evident that the 2-hour turnover is relatively large, consistent with the increase of Friday, February 24th. Hence, now here it is. Hence, in order to more fairly reflect the relative magnitude of this particular Saturday volume, right, in comparison with the full 5-hour session, we decide that the actual total and find that we have the equivalent, we double the actual total and find that we have the equivalent of a 5 million share day. Okay? What does that mean? It means that he manipulated Saturday's volume in order to compare it with Friday's volume, because Saturday has less activity. So what he did is he said, okay, it's consistently less activity Saturday than Friday. So what he did was he just doubled it and then compared it to Friday. Now you might be thinking, like, why would he do this? Well, obviously because they're just different. If you have, for example, you have no choice but to compare it to last. If you have Saturday, you have to compare it to last Saturday. If you're forced to compare Saturday volume to Friday, how are you going to do it? Saturday, people are on vacation or, take a time off. So this is one way to do it. It's the same thing between the day and the night session. Like, can you compare ES in the morning session to ES at the night session? Can you compare their volumes? You can't. So how do you go about doing it? You have to compare the night session to prior night sessions. That's the relative comparison. And that's what people are doing today. But if you're forced to compare the night session to the day session, you have to manipulate the night session volume in such a way that the both can be compared. Right? Day and night sessions can be compared. So he was stuck with the same issue where he had Saturday volume. So he compared it with last Saturday volume and the prior Saturday sessions, but he was forced to compare it with Friday's volume. So the only way he did that was he looked at it and he doubled the Saturday volume, and then he was able to compare it with Friday's volume. Okay, because you have to figure out a factor to multiply a night session or a holiday session, or the first half hour versus lunch period, right? Or you have to find a way to compare them in order to figure out if this is high or low, because you have less participants in certain time of day and you have more participants in certain time of day. In the first 1 hour you have a lot of participants. During lunch you don't have a lot of participants. During end of day you have a lot of participants because you have the daily players entering the market. And also because people want to shut down for the day and be done with it. So there has to be a way of comparing volume, and one way to do it is what Wyckoff is saying is relative volume, and this is what people are doing today. Um, and it's not an easy thing to do, but some platforms allow you to do it. There are other platforms that are actually being built out that allow for the relative comparison of volume based on quote-unquote seasonality. And but if you're forced to compare without seasonality, how would you do it? You have to find a factor, and the way he did it was he just doubled it. So he doubled Saturday volume and then compared it to Friday volume. Anyway, this is a very important note because this really shows like how advanced this person was in reading volume. This is not someone who's just reading volume high and low. He is aware of relative volume and has figured out alternative methods to deal with seasonality of volume. And later on, like some of his studies, he even starts looking at volume at price, which later on, like someone called it volume profile, but that volume at price was looked at. The order flow method of volume, where volume, meaning the original order flow, he actually came up with that as well. Then volume on the waves, came up with that. So it's like he really covered the entire gambit of volume and really knows it very, very well, because it's been covered not only from one perspective, meaning he's covered it from the histogram angle, he's covered it from volume at price, he's covered it from wave volume, he's covered it from order flow volume, he's covered it from seasonality or relative volume. So this is a very deep insight into one of the major variables of what makes price stop and continue. So that's an important thing. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye.